Goldeneye 007 was a staple of the Nintendo 64 and completely redefined the first-person shooting genre in the 90s. This game was critically acclaimed for its revolutionary gameplay, outstanding soundtrack, hilariously fun multiplayer, and its high polygonal fist design. Okay, I made that last one up. But even though this game released all the way back in 1997, there are still thousands of fans who still play this game regularly today. Why?
To best understand Goldeneye, we're gonna have to go back.
Goldeneye 007 was released in 1997, nearly 2 years after the release of the James Bond movie. Honestly, this game had no right being successful because of this, yet this game became a huge hit, elevating the game to cult classic status and became the third best-selling game on the N64, just behind Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart. Seriously, this game is based on a 2-year-old movie and it sold over 8 million units. And interestingly enough, in the early stages of development, Rare toyed around with different possible concepts for levels as to what the game would play like. Early on, they were unsure if the game would exist as an on-rail shooter similar to Sega's Virtua Cop, to maybe being a side-scrolling game like Donkey Kong Country.
I can only imagine what that would be like.
However, the game ended up landing in the free-roaming style of gameplay, which would go on to absolutely revolutionize the future of all FPS games. The game released to universal praise, with reviewers pointing out the atmospheric and settings that were so varied and exciting, that the soundtrack was fantastic, and that the mechanics surrounding enemies and stealth were really advanced for its time.
Also, the multiplayer in this game became a huge hit,
which ended up being a feature of the game they tacked on at the very last minute of the game's development. Prior to Goldeneye, the best of the best shooters looked like this, but with Goldeneye, the visuals were really revolutionary, and this time you could actually control where you went, which was a big deal. I mean, that was a bigger deal than Mike Tyson biting that guy's ear off.
That's a 1997 joke that I'm not too sure holds up all these years later.
When I first played this game, I was probably about 5 years old, and my older brother was 8, but I vividly remember playing this game sometime around 1999 when our 21-year-old brother came home with a copy that he bought at Blockbuster of all places. Blockbuster is gone, but not forgotten. Also, for whatever reason, my cartridge looked like this, and I just always assumed that's the way it was supposed to look. Either way, right then and there, I was introduced to a first-person shooter for the first time. I, of course, being the youngest of the three to experience Goldeneye, got stuck playing the whack controller that looked like this. Okay, it didn't really look like this, but in my mind it was. But I remember when I wasn't getting smacked around in multiplayer, I watched the single player and later would even try the game out myself, and this game slowly became one of the favorites in the household because even the single player was solid here. Coming back to this game for this video has been a very interesting trip to say the least. First and foremost, these controls are atrocious. Wait, don't hate me. The controls in this game are awful by today's standards. The Nintendo 64 only had one stick, but Rare did a pretty good job with what they were given. The auto aim function works well enough, and you can get a hang of the controls after a while. You also have to remember here that besides these videos, I'm one half of a Halo-centric YouTube channel, so I'm someone who plays a lot of dual-stick controller shooter games, and coming back to this older primitive style is really rough. Though my wife, who isn't big on these types of games, actually picked up the controls way faster than me. It was pretty embarrassing. But back in the day, having a game that had this much mobility and functionality to move through levels on your own, take down enemies in different ways, and interact with different things was really a first for its time. Mix that with the fact that this game does a really awesome job at building levels that are linear enough where you can figure out what to do and how to complete it, while also having a unique enough environment in each level where the game is constantly throwing new experiences at players. I mean, this game has 20 levels. That's more than any Call of Duty game that releases today. And sure, the levels are shorter, but going on harder difficulties adds extra sections to the level where you have to go back into rooms you hadn't been in before, track down different things, and do things that you hadn't done in your regular, easier playthroughs. But the best part by far is how this game is so accurate to its source material. So many times nowadays, we see a video game tie-in that strays so far away from anything the movie would have, but this game manages to find the perfect balance of taking inspiration from all the amazing set pieces that the movie has, and then goes and translates them into an atmospheric environment that would be fun to play in. Now, I might be a little biased here as I played the video game before the movie, but I saw the movie about a year into owning this game, and
my 6 to 7-year-old mind was absolutely blown.
It was so cool to see an actual movie with places that felt directly taken from a video game. Now, I really know it was the other way around, but that's gotta count for something. It's really cool how even sections in the movie that wouldn't make for the best level with Goldeneye's gameplay mechanics would be translated into a different type of of mission that still draws its inspiration from the movie. Like this scene where Bond is on a boat and can't get to the helicopter. It wouldn't really work well in a game like Goldeneye, but they still took the boat inspiration, making it a hostage rescue level where you even put a tracker on a helicopter. It was just the little touches like this that really brought the whole thing together. Or there's this scene which follows Natalia in the control room, and it has 2 dedicated levels on this set piece, even though in the movie Bond doesn't even go there. It's just a cool way to expand the universe using the source as inspiration rather than a lot of other movie tie-in games that just kind of said whatever. But where the levels do seem like it's a direct adaptation is so awesome to see, especially if you watch the movie sometime around playing the game, even all these years later. Also, this game had a really fun pool of weapons. Of course, Bond's iconic PP7 is there, but there's so many more weapons that you can use. I mean, I always thought this gun looked like a black pencil, and honestly, I still see the pencil today, and I don't think you can convince me that it's not a pencil, but there are a lot of other creative guns thrown in there, and you can even dual-wield guns. Also, a lot of credit needs to go to David Doak, who is one of the main programmers of the game, and while the AI seems goofy by today's standards, if he hadn't written the complex system that he did, the game would not be nearly as fun as it is. The enemy characters can react to different situations, like hearing commotion, getting shot, or having a gun pointed at them, which was some really deep stuff for back in the day, and since this game had such a small development team, it's very impressive that a game that had so many complex systems going into it was able to function as well as it did. The channel AI in Games did a really good breakdown on Goldeneye's AI, so if you're interested in AI technology, you should definitely check out that video. Now sure, a few things in this game could use a little more polish. I mean, look at those fists, and flipping through weapons and items can take a while, and every item in this game can explode. I mean, is all the furniture in this game laced with nitroglycerin? I'm not sure. And of course, while this game doesn't have full voice acting, which would have been nice, the small amount of voice acting that is featured here is unique, to say the least. But hey, it ended up becoming so iconic that they even used it in an early draft of the 2017 Tom Cruise movie, The Mummy, that they accidentally posted online, which wasn't the version they were supposed to release.
Pan, this is November 4, 09er.
What the hell?
Seriously, what is this? But honestly, the way the game balances different paces, like sneaking around to running and gunning like crazy, really makes you feel like you're James Bond. There's different gadgets inspired from the movie that feel Bond-esque. The story is portrayed through some written dialogue that translates the characters' portrayals in a decent way. And there's characters that were even in the movie. Natalia was the worst though. Seriously. Oh, and there's cheat codes. Seriously, what's better than playing through a whole game like this? This game, surprisingly enough, would become the focus of a new style of gameplay as well after its release, speedrunning. Sure, speedrunning is often associated with Mario 64 or Mirror's Edge, but the attention around speedrunning as an entire genre of competitive play has really began to grow with the rise of game streaming, rapidly shedding light on communities that have existed for years and finally giving them a platform to present their talents. And while Goldeneye speedrunning has existed pretty much since the launch of the game, with players over the years logging their best times on each level to message boards, to this day there are still players trying to one-up each other's scores by breaking down levels to an absolute science to see what could potentially be possible in game theory. It's honestly one of the most committed and interesting speedrunning communities I've ever seen, and I really appreciate watching it. Sure, it might take me 20 minutes to beat a level, but nope, these guys just fly right through it. The Elite.net has been one of the longest running communities for speedrunners in Goldeneye and Perfect Dark, and it's so cool to see how they've tracked these times, explored new techniques to shave off seconds on runs, and just the camaraderie between players when something is achieved. I mean, I reached out for some questions on their Discord, and people flocked to help me out. It was really cool, and each year some fans will even put money down in forms of bounty incentives for speedrunners to try to break or tie long-standing records. 2019 alone saw over $1,000 of available and potential bounties, with many of them actually being achieved and claimed. Will I ever try speedrunning Goldeneye for myself? Well, considering I can barely walk at times, it's not happening. Our White Goose's channel is one of my favorite channels though. I've been watching now for a few months where he really goes in depth and does these studies on Goldeneye and Perfect Dark speedrun strats, along with awesome retrospectives on the world records and the overall community. And some of his videos on Goldeneye have gotten nearly 1 million views, which really shows that the Goldeneye community is still very much alive, whether it be a casual respect for the game or die-hard fans who follow the speedrunning community religiously. Plus, seeing someone's reaction to beating a record is pretty awesome.
Dude, I fucking just got I'm a f***ing legend.
But between the great single player and the competitive local split screen that I'm sure a lot of people have gotten accused of screen peeking on, there's no surprise that this game hit the level of success that it did. I mean, who else remembers playing slappers only? Plus, with the speedrunning community constantly growing to audiences bigger than ever, and more people are watching live streams, the game continues to live on today. Also, Oddjob did nothing wrong. Just saying. With the legacy that this game created and the huge success that it would become, there's no surprise really that this game would lead to a ton of different influences afterwards. Rare would lose a bidding war to get the rights to the next Bond installment, so they would start working on a spiritual sequel called Perfect Dark, using their own characters and building their own IP from the ground up. David Doak would work on the early stages of Perfect Dark before leaving the studio to help start up Free Radical Design, which ended up creating the legendary Time Splitter series, and both of those games ended up being pretty damn good. EA, on the other hand, would acquire the rights to Bond and release Tomorrow Never Dies on the PlayStation, which was a hybrid third-person and first-person steaming pile of garbage. So then afterwards, they would try to return to the Rare formula with The World Is Not Enough,
which both aimed and failed to live up to what Goldeneye was.
but they did eventually release Nightfire, which was a pretty good game. Plus, after Goldeneye's release, every FPS game that was in development at its time would really have to take a hard look at itself to see if the awesome ideas and concepts designed by the small team at Rare could be implemented into their games. We would see a lot of influences from Goldeneye make their way into games over the next few years, like Half-Life and Halo. EA would do a stereotypical EA thing and try to ride off the success that Goldeneye was, and in 2004 they announced Goldeneye 2, which would be renamed to Goldeneye Rogue Agent, and honestly, this game was so disappointing to me as a 9-year-old kid. I originally bought the game thinking it was a remake of the original, which made me super excited, as I assume a lot of people actually did back then. But yeah, this game has absolutely no relation whatsoever to the game or movie Goldeneye. Cool movie, eh? Cool move. Instead, your character is injured at the start of the game and is given a cybernetic golden eye. So you have a golden eye. Honestly, I just remember this game being boring for what it was worth. They tried to do some darker story exploring the underbelly of the Bond world, and I just didn't like it. I'm sure I'll get around to reviewing it one day after we go through the other Bond games that I want to do first, and I'm curious how this game would have done if it didn't try to milk the GoldenEye's success, but On the other hand, in 2008, Rare started development on an HD remaster to GoldenEye with new textures built upon the same game, but since Microsoft now owned Rare, there were still some distribution issues that Microsoft and Nintendo couldn't agree on, which resulted in this project getting scrapped. But at least out of all this, a Perfect Dark remaster would come out, and it was actually quite good, and probably one of the best ways to experience Perfect Dark to this day. It's just a shame that we never got it for GoldenEye. Good guy Activision would come around later on and swoop up the rights to the Bond games, and in 2010, they announced that they were going to remake GoldenEye, this time with Daniel Craig as Bond for whatever reason. Okay, I'll be honest, I was still disappointed as I really wanted the game to just be a straight up remake of the original, but at least Activision took a lot of elements from the movies and did a similar idea of picking popular set pieces from the film and then translating them into a game with some newer ideas. I don't know. To me, the game feels like it's trying really hard to be a Call of Duty knockoff, but I mean, it's better than EA's bait and switch, so can I really complain too much? However, in the background of all of this,
A team of Goldeneye fans were working on a passion project.
to give GoldenEye's multiplayer the enhancements that fans really wanted. In 2005, Nicholas Bishop, who went by Nixter Online, began development on a PC fan remake using Valve's Source engine, and before too long, a small team of amateur developers were working on this project. Unfortunately, Nixter would pass away in 2006, but the rest of the team continued on with the game in his dedication and even put out multiple alphas and betas for players to try out and give feedback on over the years. Finally, in 2016, this game would release the biggest update, version 5.0, which went viral, bringing thousands of players in to relive the classic experience, though on a new engine with online capabilities. Sure, the game wasn't using the original engine, and it didn't have the single-player experience with it, but it was such a cool thing, and the story behind the development was really awesome. And look at those fists! And while not as many people play today, there's still occasionally active servers you can jump on to play with and try the game out. More recently, though, two of the devs from the GoldenEye Source team branched off to begin development on a new fan game called GoldenEye 25. This time, the game focuses on being a true-to-form remake of the single-player side of the game using the Unreal Engine. Even David Doak has shown his support for the project, and the development team behind this is hoping the game will release by 2022. But honestly, from the things that they've shown off so far, it looks so amazing because graphically it looks so much clearer, but at the same time, the gameplay looks true to form to what Goldeneye really was about back in the day. And I have so many awesome experiences with this game from over the years, from getting to see what it was like to escape from prison, to driving a tank through Soviet Russia, all the way to getting to experience big head James Bond T-posing off of a cliff. This game could have easily been my favorite first-person shooter on the N64, but then again, Perfect Dark came out.
And that game had an alien named Elvis, so what can you expect from me?